Here comes the last panel discussion of the day and actually of the summit really, on a topic that resonates with all of us here, Hong Kong's bridging role in a changing world. In an era of fast-changing power dynamics, Hong Kong's ability to adapt and leverage its strengths, as well as to navigate the complexities of an increasingly multipolar world, will determine its continued relevance as a bridge between China and the West. So how has Hong Kong's role evolved, and what should it do to keep this relevance? Now, ladies and gentlemen, let's put your hands together to welcome our moderator for the following session, Mr. Vikram Channa, Vice President and Head of Content and Products, Greater China and Southeast Asia, Warner Brothers Discovery. And joining Mr. Channa on stage are his panelists, including Ambassador Craig Allen, Senior Counselor, the Cohen Group. Please welcome. Next, we have Sir Sharad Coles, KCMG LVO, Chair, China-Britain Business Council, and Senior Advisor to the group, HSBC Holdings. Let's welcome. And we also have Professor Howard W. French, Professor of Journalism, Columbia Journalism School and Columbia University. Let's welcome Professor French. Gentlemen, please be seated. And now the mic over to Mr. Channa.
Great. First of all, thank you so much for inviting all of us for this final panel, which we hope will be the most exciting one, given the topic of Hong Kong's bridging role in a changing time. And we have three esteemed panelists, each one very distinct from their perspective. They know the mainland and China really well over their long experiences. Craig Allen, through a US perspective, with a lot of in-depth experience in trade, investment, and the business world. Sir Sharad, who knows Hong Kong well with his advisory role at HSBC, as well as being a diplomat, a good understanding of the geopolitics that are shifting, and brings that perspective to this panel. And Howard French, who's a journalist, but also an author, who's written really amazing works on the cultural and historical trajectory on China, on other emerging markets, and has been tracking disruption for a while. And I think the world's kind of coming round to what he's been tracking for a while, and we hope to get his perspectives on this really amazing topic of Hong Kong's bridging role in a changing world. I was sort of listening in yesterday to the great panels that were going on, and we learned a lot, so much from each of them. And in the morning, I was trying to sort of frame how to set up our panel and get our panelists to sort of share. And sort of what I wrote over this morning is that as inevitable geopolitical shifts emerge once again, are we pivoting to one world, two systems, or maybe even three or four? And in that context, perhaps Hong Kong may well be positioned to share its experiences via its DNA of one country, two systems, as that might be the new normal that is emerging. And as they say, every crisis is an opportunity. So as we move into a once-in-a-100-year great reset, or dare we say, slowbalization, as we slow down and try and take a breather, and in this pause, is Hong Kong poised to play a very unique role again? So I'd like to turn to Sir Sharad first. And given your unique relationship with Hong Kong, given your background from Britain, and your deep experience, and maybe you can sort of position it also from your own journey into Hong Kong and mainland China over the past. How do you respond to this sort of advantage potentially Hong Kong has as the sort of positioning of the one country, two systems, which might have some important bearing in the world as it moves to a very similar kind of positioning?
Well, thank you, Vikram, and thank you, Regina, for asking us. I first came to Hong Kong 40 years ago. I landed as a young British diplomat with my boss at Kai Tak and fell in love with a country, a territory, a place, a connector that I've always felt is special and different and will remain so. Nearly 10 years later, as the last head of the Hong Kong department, I don't know why I need to use the microphone. All right, for the translation. Nearly 10 years ago, as the last head of the Hong Kong department of the Foreign Office before the handover, I fell in love again, but this time with Regina Ip's intellectual courage, her willingness to speak truth to power, her sense of humor, and her sense of proportion. And when she asked me to come and speak at this conference, I said yes without hesitation. Some of you will know a rather middle-ranking department store on Oxford Street called John Lewis. That slogan always used to be, never knowingly undersold. I've always thought that Hong Kong undersells itself, spends too much time worrying about its place in the world, not realizing its extraordinary assets, which, as Vikram says, in this time and this world, make it exceptionally well placed. I think I'm right in saying that 70% of the foreign direct investment coming out of China goes through Hong Kong. 60% of the incoming investment into China comes through this territory. Britain does about as much trade with Hong Kong as we do with Japan. We receive 4.5 times the volume of direct investment from and through Hong Kong as we do from the mainland. And so it goes on with the rule of law, with the cultural connections, the educational connections, the sense that we are kindred spirits. And what annoys me more than anything else is the rubbish talked by Hong Kong and China's ill-wishers in Washington and Westminster who claim that Hong Kong has become just another Chinese city. You only have to walk through Central, dance in Lan Kwai Fong, do what you always do in Hong Kong to know that it is special and different and will remain so. So I say to my friends from Hong Kong here, keep selling Hong Kong, be confident that it is what the mainland wants, it is what the leadership wants, and it is what the leadership will support. Because having this place that is special and different is in everybody's interest. The world's interest, and say it not too loudly in the White House, it's in America's interest as well. So that's what I feel. It's also what I know intellectually, and why I feel so strongly that I want to do all I can to help this place, from which so many of us Britons and Americans and Germans and others have done so well. We need to repay the debt by helping Hong Kong on the next stage of its remarkable journey.
Thank you, Sir Sharad. And you neatly set up Craig with your mention of the US and the changes that are happening. Craig, from your perspective, how do you feel about the advantage Hong Kong has with one country, two systems experience, now that we may be, and people talked of the bipolarity or tripolarity that might occur. Go ahead.
Well, let me start out with my thanks also to Regina and the organizers for this wonderful conference. I've certainly learned a lot, and I'm grateful to be here. I'm cognizant every time I come to Hong Kong that this is the spiritual home of Bruce Lee and Jackie Chan. And they have taught us with some flair that when times are bad, it sometimes brings out the strongest and the best of the Hong Kong people. And today, times are difficult, and I have no doubt the strengths of the Hong Kong people will be manifest. I was very much struck with Regina's opening comments, and I'll try and quote here, Regina, that we stand by our country and our unswerving dedication to the multinational order. And I found that characterization fascinating because Hong Kong's strengths are indeed undergirded by the economic openness and free trade spirit of this great city. It is that openness, it is that willingness to trade with everyone, that welcoming spirit to everyone that gives Hong Kong its real distinctive strengths. And I'd like to characterize those strengths in a couple of ways. Firstly, Hong Kong has had, still has, some of the greatest entrepreneurs in the world. And I could come out with 20 or 30 names. And those entrepreneurs are still strong. We still see that same spirit. And that is the primary strength of Hong Kong. Secondly, Hong Kong is really the capital of the Greater Bay Area. And this is the most, from an innovation perspective, the most dynamic place on earth. Silicon Valley and the Greater Bay Area are neck and neck. Both have their strengths, but Shenzhen particularly and the Greater Bay Area are really coming on very strong. And there's no reason to expect that that will abate during my lifetime. The financial markets are superb. I note that stock prices are up 16% this year. The listing of CATL yesterday was a triumph, the largest listing in the world thus far this year. I had served in Southeast Asia and in Japan, and living there, I recognize Hong Kong as the hinge city, where I have to go through to get to back to Europe or North America. And when I walk the streets of Hong Kong, I see that the influence of everywhere very clearly, and that diversity is your strength. Also, the superb infrastructure is evident. It's better every time I come to Hong Kong. And then I would say that your welcoming spirit to all who visit is commendable. This is a great place to live, and people from around the world, the best, want to come here for that purpose. I have to say that Hong Kong, of course, is dependent, at least to some extent, on the Chinese economy. And if the Chinese economy is going to do well, then Hong Kong will do well. If the Chinese economy is not going to do well, then that's a problem. And I think that it's fair to ask how strong the Chinese economy is, and what are the strengths and the weaknesses, and how do we work within the enormous developments within the Chinese economy. There was a lot of talk earlier about trade in this program, and particularly about the US. And I accept that fully. However, I would like to stress that it is really some of the distortions within the Chinese economy that are causing a populist reaction around the world. And I think if you look at the Chinese economy, it is characterized by overemphasis on the supply side, underemphasis on the demand side. On the demand side, Chinese are saving far too much. Household consumption as a percentage of GDP is only 40%, compared to about a 60 to 70% global average. And it's incredibly important for the prosperity of Hong Kong for those distortions to be corrected by appropriate monetary and fiscal policy over time. The United Nations Industrial Development Organization just released a survey suggesting that China might move from 33% of global manufacturing up to 45% of global manufacturing at the end of the 15th five-year plan. And I would argue that this is not good for the Chinese economy, that it further distorts that supply-demand disequilibrium, and that it should be corrected. And for the prosperity of China, for the prosperity of Hong Kong, for the prosperity of the world, it is essential that domestic demand play a much larger role in the Chinese economy through expansion of the social safety welfare net, improvement of pensions, improvement of healthcare. Healthcare in China is 6.8% of GDP only. I think Chinese would welcome a doubling of that. And indeed, I think that that is essential for continued global prosperity. I'm confident that China and Hong Kong will both do very well together, but these fundamental distortions should be addressed in an urgent manner. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg. Moving on to Howard, who's the journalist on this panel and has tracked the region, China in particular, as well as Hong Kong. How do you see, from your experience of extensively covering China over the years and authoring several books, your understanding of its historical trajectory, and how do you see it evolving for Hong Kong, and Hong Kong being an influencer and as a bridge between China and the rest of the world, particularly in the context of China's increasing influence?
Thank you very much, Vikram. So many rich things to pick up on in this panel. I'd like to begin, though, first with the thanks to our host. I don't have a long history with Regina, but I have a rich short history with Regina, and it's been a very pleasant one. And I was sorry not to have been able to welcome her in New York recently, but you have treated all of us so nicely here, and I want to thank you for that. It's really been wonderful to be back in Hong Kong. I don't have quite the vintage that Sharad has. I first came to Hong Kong in 1998 and stayed in the Mandarin Hotel where he's lodging right now, and have been back many times since. I was a visiting scholar at Hong Kong University once for 6 months working on a book about Chinese history. I have many friends in Hong Kong, and it's always a great pleasure to come back here. I want to pick up on the characterization of Hong Kong that Craig noted of its talent for welcoming people. And I mean Hong Kong in general and not just our wonderful host. That's really a characteristic trait of this place that really stands out. And I've been to an awful lot of countries and cities, and Hong Kong is quite distinguished in that regard. Vikram, you used the word disruption earlier, and Sharad used the word worry. And I'd like to sort of pull on those two threads to make some introductory comments. I also would like to note in passing that together with Craig and a small number of other people, I'm one of the few Americans involved in this program in any direct way, right? And so I'm going to do some analogizing with the situation of the United States, which I think may surprise some people. Hong Kong's history is a history of disruption, of being able to pivot in the face of disruption, to be able to land on its feet as circumstances surrounding it are disrupted in very dramatic ways. And so Hong Kong, in a previous iteration, was this very rich place on the periphery of China. It was a Chinese city, of course, but with a unique colonial history. China was poor, relatively speaking, and Hong Kong was rich, relatively speaking. Hong Kong passed through a phase of worry, if I may, observing the very rapid rise of China in terms of wealth, wondering if it might not lose its own specialness by virtue of the fact that China was developing so fast, and that the gap between Hong Kong's wealth and standard of living and the wealth and standard of living of China overall, and of particular parts of China especially, were changing so rapidly themselves. I think we're sort of in the tail end of that phase of things right now. And here's where my analogy with the United States comes in. There are many things to deplore. This isn't really the place for me to develop this fully, but there are many things to deplore, I can say personally, as an American, about the situation at present in my country. And many of my conversations with fellow participants here have touched upon developments in my country. But the United States also has had to wrestle with, and is still, in fact, in the grips of, an adjustment. And the adjustment goes something like this. In the post-war era, the United States was, of course, disproportionately the most wealthy and powerful nation in the world for a very long period of time. And then various things begin to happen in other parts of the world, most notably probably China, where wealth and power begin to increase on a rapid incline. This provokes anxiety, it provokes worry, it provokes disruption. Part of it is due, as Craig correctly noted, to structural issues in the world economy and in China's approach to economic development, but that's not my specialty. What I want to speak to are the sort of psychological and political manifestations of this. Americans have a choice. They can see the world as a place where they are becoming less wealthy compared to other people, less powerful compared to other people, in a relative sense, and it's important to make the distinction between relative sense and absolute sense. I see no reason to imagine there's any likelihood of an immediate, sharp, absolute decline in American wealth or power, but in a relative sense, I think these trends are unmistakable, right? And so we have a choice as Americans. We can become aggrieved by this, we can turn inward, we can succumb to populism, we can close ourselves off from the rest of the world, or we can understand the rise of the rest of the world, or certainly certain parts of the west of the world, the rapid rise of certain parts of the west of the world, as opportunities for us. And as an opportunity, I would argue, wealth in new places is an opportunity for more wealth in America. Well, here's where the analogy with Hong Kong comes in, right? As Hong Kong has had to adjust to this disruption, losing this early, very special characteristic it had of being this uniquely wealthy place attached to the Chinese mainland, culturally, ethnically Chinese, of course, but economically and politically very different. It also had that choice, or a similar choice. Do we see ourselves as losing something, or do we see ourselves gaining something by the rise of China's wealth and the sort of enlargement of China's place in the world? And I think that Hong Kong has correctly understood that its opportunities lie not in bemoaning, not in regretting, not in looking back to this momentary position that it enjoyed in the not-so-distant past, but looking forward and understanding that the prosperity, this new stirring prosperity of China, is in fact an opportunity for Hong Kong, and that Hong Kong may be losing something relatively, but absolutely Hong Kong is gaining quite a bit. And so that's the very crude analogy I would like to draw with the situation of the United States. And Vikram, you used the word has come up in many of our conversations, has come up in other panels, GPA. And this is the sort of one of the contexts for which we can work this out, right? That Hong Kong's emergence, taking advantage of the relative rise of China, is unfolding in this particular dimension.
Correct.
Most particularly.
I think GBA is a great point to build up to, and as we were all discussing when we were preparing for this panel, as geopolitics dominates, what we've seen over the last 15, 20 years of globalization in the past is the rise of urban clusters and urban conglomerates, of which GBA is perhaps the latest. In a world fraught with geopolitics, are clusters like these, and particularly GBA and Hong Kong, a more neutral way of dealing directly with other clusters in other parts of the world and pushing through geoeconomics and the interests that surround geoeconomics and bypass the more partisan political world we live in? So maybe, Craig, you might want to, and then Sir Sharad.
Yeah, it's such an interesting question. I think in a WTO world, that is very clear that there was a clustering that is economically rational and has been effective at creating great efficiencies across virtually every supply chain that exists. However, we're moving away from a WTO world to a world of more populism and nationalism, not only in my country, but around the world. And I'm not sure that the concept works as well in a more fragmented, regionalized economy. I note with both joy and sorrow that Asia, the meta-narrative here is that Asia is getting rich. 50% of the wealth around the world is going to come out of this region, the new wealth in this world. And that is due to taking advantage of global, relatively frictionless trade and investment across the globe. However, as we move away from a WTO world, that's going to become more difficult. Now, Hong Kong is blessed by being in the middle of where the greatest value will come from over the next 20 years, that is, in Asia. And I worry if my country, if the companies that I've worked with my whole career are not fully able to take advantage of that through trade, then the only way that they'll be able to do so is through investing outside of the United States. So as we move to a more populist, regionalized, nationalist world, the advantages of global clusters might indeed begin to become less obvious. But at the end of the day, efficiency is maximized through free trade across all borders in a clustered configuration. And I have no doubt that that'll be true 20 years from now, but it might be true more in a regional sense than in a global sense.
That makes a lot of sense. If you remember the speech by the chief executive, he said, the Hong Kong delegation had just returned from the Middle East. Hong Kong's integration with the mainland into ASEAN, we all know through RCEP. But movement is happening, particularly to draw the Middle East in, which is the new exciting territory, which again, Hong Kong can be the representative of the global champions, the entrepreneurs that are emerging out of the SMEs that are emerging out of China. So, Sir Sharad, I mean, just building on what Craig said, I mean, you must certainly see more possibilities in that area.
Yes, well, I very much agree with Craig, of course, but I would like to see regional arrangements as not an end in themselves, but a means to a greater end. It's more than just over 200 years since the man who invented the theory of comparative advantage, David Ricardo, died. And we all benefit from maximizing economic efficiency across the globe, not just in a particular Bay Area or a particular Delta or inside the European Union. We benefit from maximizing advantage across the world. So I hope that as Britain struggles to recover from the disaster of Brexit, to reconnect with Europe, to engage with Trump's United States, to re-engage in a sensible and balanced way with China, as we're doing, we will see this as a way of, over time, reducing all barriers, not just creating more regional blocks. Now, I'm not normally a name dropper, but 2 months ago, Craig and I were with the President of China, Xi Jinping, at a meeting of global CEOs. I'm not a global CEO, and as far as I know, Craig isn't yet. But at this extraordinary meeting, a few days before the misnamed Liberation Day, and I don't know whether Xinhua reported this or not, but it was an important statement and really goes to the heart of what this is all about, and indeed what this conference is all about. The President was reading out a speaking note drafted for him by the academics and intellectuals, the great mandarins in the State Council and beyond,
no doubt many of them from Shanghai or Tsinghua. And then suddenly, I'd only met Xi Jinping once before with David Cameron. Suddenly, he threw down his speaking note, raised his arms like this, and he said, "From the bottom of my heart, I want to thank all you foreign countries for what you've done for China. Without you, China would not be where it is today." And I've often thought, as chair of the China-Britain Business Council, I want to do the same to the Chinese companies, the Hong Kong companies now investing in Britain. Britain will not get to net zero without Chinese investment, Chinese technology, the movement of intellectual capital from Zhongguo to Yingguo. That is my China-Britain dream. And so, as history flows in one direction and another, we need to bring those barriers down and maximize advantage for all our people. Just one other story, and then I'll finish. A year earlier, 2 years ago this month, I was lucky enough to take a delegation to meet the Premier of China, Li Qiang. And I had with me a remarkable pig farmer from Yorkshire called Neil Willis, with a very red face and a hairy tweed coat. And every month, Mr. Willis and Cranswick Foods send 75 containers of pig's feet, pig's trotters, and pig's heads to China. The parts of the pig we're silly enough not to eat in Britain, but they are delicious. And I said to the Premier, Mr. Willis would like to send more pig's feet and more pig's heads to China, because that's comparative advantage. What the people of Yorkshire won't eat, the people of Norfolk or London or Birmingham or Manchester won't eat, the people of Shanghai and Beijing and Guangzhou will eat. That is comparative advantage. And I was delighted to hear, after I'd introduced Mr. Willis with his red face and his hairy tweed coat to Premier Li Qiang, 6 weeks later, Mr. Willis sent me a message to say he was now sending 100 containers of the most delicious Yorkshire and Norfolk pig's feet to China. So eat your heart out in Shanghai or Beijing. You are getting the comparative advantage we are denying ourselves. But I went on to say, sorry, just one thing. In the end, this isn't about the profits of Wei Feng or Sun Kai or wherever. In the end, global trade, global commerce, this conference is about the health and wealth and happiness of all our peoples, of the ordinary people of all our countries, not the great tycoons, the businessmen, the pretend bankers. It's about the wealth and happiness of ordinary people. And that's why global commerce matters so much, and why putting up barriers, whether it's leaving the European Union or tariffs or whatever it may be, it's so bad for ordinary people.
Thank you, Sir Sharad, for that sharing, and particularly the perspective of the President himself. In some ways, you know, as one was thinking about this panel, this notion of what we are facing today, if you look at it in a more optimistic way, is a crisis of success. Years of globalization, which began and has gone through several iterations, starting from, you know, post-war to the Nixon shock, and then, you know, the more debt-based economy of the US. They have all been patterns of opportunities in which so many nations, including China, India, others, have risen. And all that's happened is now we have to come back to the table again because everybody's grown up and we need another conversation, which certainly from the trade talks that are beginning to happen again is a very good sign. And in this new world, you know, China itself has changed. And Hong Kong, once again, you know, you mentioned, Craig, about the city of Bruce Lee and Jackie Chan. But Hong Kong has moved on from Bruce Lee and Jackie Chan. It is also the center, and so Sharad, we were talking about the university system. It is again in a position to take the new talent, the energetic talent of China, to come to Hong Kong, to its amazing university system, to its open pop culture, to bring the creator economy of the mainland into this global city. And I think that also leads to whole new bridges of understanding for the world to understand the new China, because there is a lot of misunderstanding in the world of misinformation and complicated information flows. So, I mean, Craig, any thoughts on that? And then maybe Howard, from your perspective, you know, from a cultural standpoint.
I do agree completely that Cantonese culture, Hong Kong culture, or Cantonese culture as filtered through Hong Kong, I guess, is vibrant, alive, strong, wonderful, welcomed everywhere around the world, underappreciated in Hong Kong. As a youngster, maybe I watched too many Bruce Lee movies, but I do appreciate that spirit. I do appreciate the vibrancy of the culture. Hong Kong is characterized by one country, two systems. And I would say that the cultural element of the Hong Kong system reflects very, very well Chinese traditional Han virtues, color, creativity, dynamism, and outward vibrancy. So the world is anxious for more Hong Kong culture. Yes, the movies have changed. Run Run Shaw, may he rest in peace. But the culture of Hong Kong reflects China as better than any other Chinese city. I just hope that that's appreciated here, and that you use that that deep well of cultural wealth to better inform Hong Kong's place in the world and to drive Hong Kong's status and prestige going forward. Don't underestimate Bruce Lee and Jackie Chan. They are your best ambassadors around the world, and they are welcome everywhere.
Well, just as a very interesting aside, just fairly recently we did a series on Warner Brothers Discovery with a producer in Hong Kong, and we aptly named it Re-Enter the Dragon. And what we did in that was we took iconic classic Hong Kong films, the ones you mentioned with Bruce Lee and Jackie Chan and Anita Mui and others, and we got young Hong Kong directors to recreate in short videos moments of those iconic films, and then we filmed the recreation moments and made that into a new series. So this was a new young creative energy of Hong Kong and others here, rebooting its own past in Re-Enter the Dragon. So Howard, some thoughts from your perspective and your cultural trajectories with which you've understood this part of the world?
Sure, thank you. If I may, I'd like to return to something we were discussing earlier first, and that is, you know, this business of mega regions and GBA and the like. I would like to take mild issue with Craig in the following sense. I am not as pessimistic as I understood him from his comments to be, that we are entering some kind of phase shift into a totally nationalistic world, or that it is altogether going to be a post-WTO world even. There's definitely trends that suggest directional movements like that, but the reason I'm not so pessimistic is precisely because of the role of GBAs in the world. I believe that my own government will bend before economic reality bends to its ideology. The best illustration of that, I think, or the best predictor of that, I think, draws on the experience of GBAs. The Great Lakes GBA in my country, which straddles the border between the United States and Canada, is an extraordinarily part a large part of the global economy and a source of dynamism for the United States. And so if my government is being wrong-headed in waging a kind of war against the synergies that exist across these national frontiers, I think that reality will prevail one way or another, and it might prevail sadly for the United States, but over time I think at the minimum a successor to the Trump administration, a new government, will come to recognize the fact that this is a source of great strength for the American economy and for the United States. I'd like to bring this back to Hong Kong, though. I also think, and this is in tension a bit with Craig's comments, and no disrespect intended, but I think that the history of mega-regions is just beginning in the world. As some of you know, I've written quite a lot about Africa, and Africa is the place of greatest demographic growth in the world right now. It is the place of greatest urbanization in the world right now. And as a consequence of this, it's the place where the newest and potentially largest mega-regions are coming into life in the world. The area of West Africa between Abidjan, the economic capital of Ivory Coast, and Lagos in Nigeria will, I predict, be the largest mega-region demographically in the world in the very near future, and will be a very important economic player in the world. And so you have a GBA here in Hong Kong and neighboring parts of Guangdong, which is one of the 2 or 3 largest mega-regions of the world. And I think this points to a future vocation for Hong Kong, where Hong Kong has a tremendous amount to teach to places where you have emerging mega-regions about integration, about trade, about innovation, about banking and investment, about infrastructure, about the soft sides of all of these things as well, which get into culture. And I think that, so if Hong Kong were to pursue this vocation, I think it has, again, David Ricardo, tremendous comparative advantages that stem from its own experience, which is recent and extraordinary.
I think I would add AI to all the points you also made.
Yes, if I could. The panel on AI yesterday was great. And
really great.
And the panelists made the point over and over again that this revolution can't just be the revolution where a few powerful countries sort of tie everything up and leave everyone else out. And so here again is an opportunity for Hong Kong to help lead the way in developing new perspectives on integration of AI into development in mega-regions and through urbanization in parts of the world that are just getting into these dynamics now.
Just an aside, a while back we were interviewing Wang Jian, one of the founders of Alibaba Cloud, and we talked about AI. And his perspective was really intriguing. He said, but we don't see it as artificial because we created it. So it's all man-made intelligence, human intelligence. And that sort of underscores the Chinese perspective on AI, which could be different. And I think that's where Hong Kong as the center, where a lot of innovation is happening, not just on the industrial side, but also on the creative side. I think those perspectives, cultural perspectives with which we look at AI, might be also germane for all of us. Just as a sort of perspective from Wang Jian on AI, Regina knows this. We did a series with one of the hottest TV stars, movie stars of China called Wang Yibo. And as we were interviewing him, we also asked him, as a young person, as a young superstar of China, are you worried about AI? And he said the same thing which Wang Jian said. He said, oh no, AI is also man-made and it's natural, so I don't worry about it. It's very interesting how there's a different perspective in forming AI between East and West. I think this is a good point, Sharat, to come to you, because we talked a lot about university and education, and you know it deeply, in your understanding of Hong Kong, and maybe you can share a little bit. Meanwhile, if all of you have some questions coming in, please do share. We have a couple, but love to get more.
No, well, I've always thought that just as important as the movement of financial capital is the movement of intellectual capital, cultural capital across borders. And in Hong Kong's universities, but also in the great Chinese universities of Peking and Shanghai, I mean Peking University, Tsinghua, of course, Shanghai and elsewhere, that exchange is so important. I'm so proud that we have, at the moment, 200,000 Chinese students at British universities, and America's loss is Britain's gain. And I am deeply ashamed that we have only about 300 British students in China at the moment. That is an imbalance that needs to be addressed. I'd just make one point as we sort of close, Vikram. I was lucky enough as a young diplomat to serve in Washington studying American politics, and then the end of my career to serve as the head of what was then the largest British embassy in the world in Kabul, leading or as part of a failed campaign to stabilize that country. And both in Washington and later studying China, I've always observed that whether it's in families or companies or countries, Sun Tzu was right. Tactics without strategy are the noise before defeat. And you need strategic coherence, strategic discipline. You need to know where you want to get to, how you're going to get there, how you're going to deploy your intellectual resources, your financial resources. And when I wake up each morning and hear the latest tactical maneuvers from Pennsylvania Avenue, at least one end of Pennsylvania Avenue, I see an America that is accelerating its own relative decline, because great companies, great families, great countries have a sense of strategic discipline and coherence, which is essential. And Hong Kong has this role in feeding those ideas for both tactics and strategy, whether it's in economics, in scientific innovation, in cultural innovation, in just the reminding us all that in the end, we're all human beings, we're all kindred spirits on this earth, and we need to live together. Hong Kong has an absolutely irreplaceable role in connecting a country that has been the largest civilization for 20, and the largest economy for 20 of the last 25 centuries of human history, connecting China with the world. What a privilege that is.
It's a great way to summarize the spirit of what we were sharing today. I think it's also a good moment to move on to some of the questions that have come in. And one of them is, let me see. Yeah, what would be your best advice to the Hong Kong government on policies? The current cabinet has been more inward-looking to mainland China instead of connecting with the world. What could they do better to create a different fit? Maybe we can start with Craig and then go to Sir Sharad.
I think I am marvelously unprepared for this question. But I would say to approach the world with confidence and to send out your cultural ambassadors, your film, your food, your video. It is deeply, deeply welcome. And we want to see more of Hong Kong all around the world, and please be there.
Sharad.
Well, all I would say is great governments listen as well as pontificate. And I was lucky enough years ago to write speeches for Britain's answer to Regina Ip, Margaret Thatcher. And what I admired most about Margaret Thatcher was she listened. She had a very logical, rational brain of a chemist and a barrister, as well as a very big heart. And the more I see of John Lee, the more I admire him, because I see him listening, I see him leading in a quiet and determined way, doing the right thing for Hong Kong and its people. And so I wouldn't presume to offer advice except to carry on doing what you're already doing. I think in the interests of this country, this territory, this wider country, but also of the world. Everyone benefits from a successful Hong Kong.
Thank you so much. We've run out of time. Thank you again, Regina, for inviting all of us. It was a great panel for us to really even prepare for. It was a lot of fun, and I hope all of you got something out of it. Thank you very much. Xie.
Thank you to our panelists as well, and thank you, Mr. Chana, for moderating for us. May we have our panelists to remain on stage for a photo? At this juncture, we'd like to invite Mrs. Regina Yip, Professor Yang Jiemian, and Mr. Inaki Amate to join our panelists on stage for a photo. Ladies and gentlemen, another big round of applause to our esteemed panelists, please. Their diverse global perspectives paired with their profound understanding of Hong Kong have given us truly invaluable insights today. And thank you so much for your optimism about a city's future and for sharing your wisdom with us at the summit. It's very important for us to know that, as Sir Sharad mentioned, it's important for us to bring health, wealth, and happiness to our people. And that's what this summit is about. All right, one more photo for our camera, just right at the front. All right, thank you once again to all our panel members, and thank you to our distinguished guests for joining us here on stage. It's truly inspiring session. Thank you so much. Gentlemen, you may now proceed to your seats and be seated. Thank you so much. And ladies and gentlemen, with that, it is now time to officially bring the Global Prosperity Summit to a close. Before we part ways, once again, please join me in putting your hands together to thank our speakers and moderators over the past 2 days for the invaluable insights and contributions. Thank you once again to all the speakers and moderators for being here with us and for all of you for joining us as well. We hope you've truly enjoyed and benefited from the thought-provoking discussions throughout the summit. We also hope the summit has not only broadened your perspectives, but also helped you forge new connections. And for our friends from abroad, we wish you a safe and pleasant journey to your next destination. Thank you again for joining us at the GPS 2025, and we look forward to welcoming you back in the next year. We'll see you next time. Goodbye.